I'm Kristen Solomon, court liaison and advocate with Right Turn Impact. Today on Make an Impact, I'm sitting down with Colt Leitess, the state's attorney for Anne Arundel County and the first woman ever to be elected to that office. Anne has spent more than 3 decades prosecuting serious crime, from homicides to gang violence. But what I really want to explore today is something that doesn't always get talked about in prosecutorial circles. What happens when accountability and recovery meet? Let's head inside and talk with her.
So yeah, I was a teenager and I went on a school field trip when I was 15, and we were in a federal courthouse and I watched some trials going on, and I thought I could do this, I could help people, and I thought I could speak for people who can't speak for themselves. So I gravitated toward the idea of being a prosecutor and helping like the most vulnerable victims. I just always had a sense of right and wrong and, righteousness and, thinking I knew better than other people. I think maybe because I'm an only child and grew up around a lot of adults, and they were bossing me around and I was pushing right back. So maybe the personality and the how I was raised. But I was encouraged to speak up even as a little kid. I had a voice at the family dinner table. I had my boyfriend and his brother kind of scoffed at me. I said, I'm gonna grow up and go to law school, be a prosecutor, and he kind of laughed at me. Like I couldn't do that. So that was even more inspiring. I was like, oh, watch me.
What happened to that boyfriend?
Well, he didn't become a lawyer. He was talking about becoming a lawyer. He's not a lawyer.
You're the first woman to be voted into this office.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I hope to continue.
You want to tell me about that?
Sure. So the state's attorney's office, 96 years, there was no woman. And the people who were in this office before, my predecessor, Frank Weathersby, was in the office for 26 years. And before him, his boss for, 18, 20 years. And I never thought I would be state's attorney. And when my boss retired in 2013, there were 9 of us who applied for the job, and I got it. So I was state's attorney for 18 months, and I lost my first election in 2014. And I became the head of the Special Victims Unit in Baltimore City, trying cases that I'd never tried before, child homicides, which I had people here before to do those cases. There are people who do a great job, but I don't ever want to see children who've been murdered by their parents or others. And so then I did that. So that was a huge growth period. And then I came back and won the 2018 election against the person who beat me in 2014. And so I was the first woman appointed because I was the interim state's attorney from 2013 to 2015, fulfilling my prior boss's term. And then I've been in office since January of 2019.
You've handled some of the most serious cases in this county for 30 years. Does that experience make you more or less open to alternatives to incarceration for people whose crimes are driven by addiction?
So I'm always sympathetic to young offenders and nonviolent offenders, and I think people deserve a second chance. I think my line in the sand is when people are hurting people, repeatedly hurting people, that's when I think it tips more towards protecting society by removing that person from being able to hurt people. But the people who are committing the low-level crimes, the DUIs, the possession of drugs, even selling drugs, a lot of times it's because they're addicted to drugs or they have mental health problems. And so we want to make that person become a productive member of society. We don't just want to warehouse that person. We don't want to saddle them with a criminal record so they can never work again. That's going against society's best interest, I think, and their best interest and their family's best interest. We want them to work and support their partner, their children, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. You expanded drug court and supported mental health diversion. What convinced you those programs were worth the investment?
So my boss before me, Frank Weathersby, was an early adopter. He was, an old school kind of prosecutor, but he always had a soft spot for people who are addicted to drugs. In fact, his daughter is a longtime counselor and has worked within the court system to help people. His wife was too. She was involved in the counseling and the addiction treatment programs. So I learned from him, And I learned that we don't have to just spend our time in putting people in jail. It's counterproductive. Let's help change lives. So when you have the ability to ask for more grant money, federal and state, then you have the possibility to expand these programs, and that's what we did.
When someone comes through the court system with a substance use charge, what does ready for treatment actually look like from where you sit?
Well, I don't think people are always ready right away. Sometimes they have to kind of stumble a couple times, so they might get in trouble. They may have a violation of probation. They may relapse. So it's not about immediately cutting them off. It's about trying to get them back on the right track. And the judges here understand that the probation is going to take some time. It doesn't usually click on the first attempt to go into treatment. So I know there's starts and stops, and we have to be willing to work with the defendant who's going to be on a long road to recovery.
Mm-hmm. What do you wish treatment programs understood about what prosecutors need in order to refer cases their way?
I guess to have people who are willing to put in the time. Sometimes the drug courts are very tough. They're tougher than regular probation. They demand a lot from the defendant. So if the defendant is not willing to risk, that constant contact, that constant treatment, and accountability, I guess encouraging people to know that it's worth it in the long run. The day-to-day is probably harder than just being on regular probation.
So this is something that I've seen across our state, where some drug courts, they'll still incarcerate you for a lengthy period of time, and then you still have to do everything in drug court. What do you think about that?
Well, I know our model seems to work better because it's the idea, as long as you are compliant, you won't go to jail. And so I think that's a powerful incentive because people don't want to go to jail. Sometimes they do go to jail if they relapse, or they'll go to jail for a short period of time, a couple weeks, and then they'll come back out. It's sort of a wake-up call. So I've seen that happen. I don't know if it's effective in the beginning. Usually the people that you're talking about may have a very lengthy record or may involve more serious crimes that you see that they're going to do some kind of treatment. They've been back a few times and the court doesn't trust them yet to put them in a stable or think that they're stable enough to go into a program. So they want to get them clean, get their mind right, and then maybe they'll be more receptive.
What role do you believe treatment programs can play in reducing recidivism?
Well, it's the support. It's when you are out in the community and you have these temptations, you need peer support, you need somebody to call, you need somebody to hold you accountable, you need somebody to help you maybe get your birth certificate or driver's license or deal with some unpaid tickets. You need that person who's in your corner, who's pulling for you. And if you know that there's somebody you can rely on, I think it's a lot easier for people to go through that. So that's what I think the treatment programs do best, is that they help that individual navigate that world after, they're kind of out on their own and there's no judge hovering over them at the moment.
How do you balance compassion for people struggling with addiction with your responsibility to victims and public safety?
I think the expectation shifts when it's violent crime. I think it shifts when it's an older person. Maybe we have a little bit more understanding when it's a younger person committing the act, but I think that's where I struggle with, how much of the justice do we need removing from society, protecting society, and how much for treatment. And that's what judges are here for, because they're the ones who balance those competing interests.
Mm-hmm. What does a successful outcome look like to you in a case where substance use is a major factor?
That person being fully employed, supporting their family, not coming back to court. I've had people walk up to me years later after I prosecuted them, and they say, "Do you remember me?" And I sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And they tell me they've changed their lives, they've turned their lives around. So that's success. Never seeing them again is actually the best, or seeing them on the street and them saying, "I'm doing well, I'm successful, I'm taking care of my family, I'm supporting myself."
What message would you give to someone watching this who feels like one mistake has already defined their future?
I think our society believes in second chances, but you have to be willing to do the work. And I think sometimes when people get in trouble, at that moment, they're motivated to change. But then maybe, as time goes on, they think, well, it wasn't a big deal. It was just one incident or one drunk driving or one possession. I can handle this. I think a lot of people think I can handle this. I don't need help. And the truth is we all need help. We all need support. We all need a way to be accountable for what we do. And I think that's why probation and treatment programs are so effective, because they give that person the opportunity to go through that phase of, I can do it on my own. Well, wow, this is really great that I have the support, to the end where they've come through it, come full circle and understood why they were using drugs or alcohol in that way.
What does justice actually look like to you when it works?
Justice to me looks, the victims are happy because perhaps that person isn't committing any more crimes. The restitution has been paid. They're leaving the victim or the witness alone. There's no further harm to that person. And I think victims are happy if they know someone's being held accountable. You'd be surprised. It's funny, sometimes society thinks, lock that person up. They committed this crime, lock them up and throw away the key. But when the victim comes to court, they have empathy and they have sympathy. And they don't want that. They want some accountability, they want responsibility, and they want that person to do better. So when everyone's happy and satisfied, that's what justice looks like to me. I mean, it is hard to vouch for people. I mean, this idea that people, are 100% healed it's aspirational.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to understand that people are going to relapse. Because when I was a younger, new attorney, if someone was in for a violation probation, they relapsed or they committed another crime, I was ready to, that's it, your probation's over, you're done. And, the seasoned judges realize, most of them, this is what the journey looks like. There's going to be fits and starts, and there's going to be stumbling.
Yeah.
And it's the long game. It's not the short game. It's very easy to just say, okay, we give up on you. But it is a journey. That's why the drug courts, like in the circuit court, they're so intensive, and they're about 18 months long. So it gives that person enough time to go full circle, if they can get there, of, I'm falling, let's help you get back up. I lost a job, let's help you get another job. I go up to the drug court, I try not to cry in the courtroom, because you see people with their families and they're with their children, and when they started drug court, their children were with somebody else, with a grandparent or another parent or another relative. And by the time they're finishing drug court, the family is reunited because mom or dad now is holding a steady job, and they're substance free, and they're being positive, and they're not going to jail anymore. If they were, going to relapse and go down that path, and they were facing years in jail, and their children wouldn't see them for years. But because, they had light at the end of the tunnel and someone to help them, they got through that 18 months and the aftercare. So to me, that's very impactful.
Mm-hmm. What was this last term like, and what is the next term going to look like?
So very busy. I'm really proud of the fact that we have won more than $5 million in grant funding. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to kind of look around and see what's missing, what can we do better. So 2 things for children we did with the grant money. One is a juvenile justice therapeutic project, which is, we have a social worker who goes into the school. She has a relationship with one school in particular. And the idea is identify juveniles who are at risk of being expelled or suspended from school. And now we're in the middle school. And so what's going on in that child's life, we're trying to keep them from coming into the criminal justice system, the juvenile courts. And so she helps to fill in that gap. What does that child need? Do we need to have referrals for counseling for the family? We had this one child who, one parent was gone, one was in prison, and living with a grandparent, not really getting the kind of attention needed. And the child had actually said to the social worker, they don't like me at this school, they want me gone. And that was pretty much the feeling that the counselor got too, this is a problem child, we want this child gone. And this child was 12 years old. So people giving up on a 12-year-old already, it's heartbreaking to me. So we want to expand to help those kids, help the schools, supplement. We're really supplementing what they're doing. Like a pupil personnel worker, but for the mental health support side of it. And the other thing we did is we have a counselor who helps children who are physically or sexually abused from the beginning when they go to the Child Advocacy Center and give their first interview on camera, up through testifying in court, preparing them in a trauma-informed way so that we don't cause any more damage. Mm-hmm. How do you talk to a child who's been sexually abused? We train the police. How do you talk to this child? The prosecutors. How do you present? How do you meet with them? When you meet with the child for the first time, you don't talk about the case. You talk about them. We work with the caring canine programs in cases like that where we bring a support animal into the courtroom and sits at the feet of the child while the child's testifying. The jury doesn't even know the dog is there, and comforts the child. So we did that with grant funding because those are children who are at risk for being further harmed with the court system. And then I also saw that in our district court, we only had victim advocates for assault cases for domestic violence. So if you were a domestic violence victim, we had an advocate assigned to you in your case. And I didn't think that was enough because there are a lot of victims in the district court who are victims perhaps by strangers who've assaulted them or committed a crime against them. So we added 4 additional advocates to the district court to help, everyday people, not just the domestic violence victim, have an advocate in the courtroom. So those are the kinds of things that I've done. I have an excellent grant writer. She is always exploring. She writes excellent proposals, and we seem to keep winning this grant money. So just to keep doing that, things that are outside just the courtroom and prosecution, how can we help people in the community?
That's really impactful. What about for this next term?
So we have a bunch of very, very big cases. We have a cold case murder from 1989 that I'm assigned to. It just got postponed about 2 weeks ago. I would have been in trial right now. Thank goodness it was postponed. But preparing for a 37-year-old murder case is pretty challenging. And we just have some big cases coming up. We have a training director who works with all of our prosecutors, so just helping her to, make the next crop of career prosecutors. About 1/3 of our office, the attorneys who come in stay, and about 2/3 come for a few years, get their training and move on. For a lot of people, this is a starter job. They're in the district court for a few years, they get their feet wet, they try a few cases, and they become very valuable out in the legal community because we train people really well. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of judges, law clerks want to come here. I spoke to about 15 law clerks yesterday here in the courthouse, and I asked who here wants to be a prosecutor, and about half of them raised their hand. So I guess we'll be getting a lot of applications. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, why are people coming and going and you have turnover? It's a national trend for turnover at police departments and prosecutors' offices from the George Floyd murder and COVID. It's a different workplace for law enforcement. We don't get the number of applications we used to. We used to get, 25 applications for every spot. Now we get, 5, 6, something like that. Law schools aren't encouraging people to be prosecutors like they used to. Some of them have gotten rid of their programs. It's fallen out of vogue. So we actually have grant money from the state because it's a national issue. How do you encourage people to be prosecutors? It's a very important role in the criminal justice system. We exonerate more people than the defense attorneys can because we see the whole case. We can see, is this person really connected to the crime? Do we really think they're responsible? And if we don't think that they are, then we dismiss their case. And we're the gatekeepers to make sure that the evidence is sound and proper against them. So very important role.
Being able to know you're going to charge them before you charge them.
Right, and making sure it's a good case and not on flimsy evidence. Sometimes, we have an idea that this person was involved, but we can't prove it in court. So we have an obligation not to bring the charges to begin with. Mm-hmm. Yes, collaboration is excellent. You have to have people on the same page about what the goals are. And that is a challenge sometimes because sometimes, the public defender or defense attorneys may have their point of view and a judge may have their point of view. And sometimes there's a little bit of a kind of a push and pull. There's sometimes people who may be recommended by a judge for drug court, and that the prosecutor's office is like, no, this person's background is too violent. We don't want this person who, we've had people who've been convicted of murder. And there's a suggestion, well, this person's a candidate for drug court. And we're like, that's a hard no on our end. And so we have to respect where the judges and the defense attorneys are coming from, but we want them to respect when we say no, when we say this is our line in the sand, that they're like, oh, okay. So that's one of the things we have to do sometimes. So we have to say, no, we're your partner. We want to cooperate, but there's some things that we just can't do. And that's what we try to do when we make an offer. Like, what is the appropriate plea offer for this person? What's the carrot, the stick, the punishment? What are we looking at? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very proud of our office. Our office has an excellent reputation. We're not pushed around very easily. I was looking at my personnel file a couple months ago, and I had seen it before years ago. I've been in and out of this office for 36 years, except for the 4 years. So I have a personnel file, it's pretty thick. And I saw a note on it from when I was interviewed in July 1990, when I was interviewed for an assistant state's attorney position. And the deputy state's attorney had a little sticky note, and it said, Anne Colt, because I was single then, Anne Colt doesn't let anybody push her around. And that's a good thing. And so I laughed about it. And that's kind of my philosophy. It's like, we're going to be respectful and professional, but we don't let anybody push us around. We cooperate. We have the same goals of justice, but at the end of the day, we're going to represent the community and the victims, and that's who our clients are, is Anne Arundel County and the people who live and work here. The thing is, this is an adversarial system. We have to push back. Sometimes the judges have a particular point of view, or the defense counsel have a particular point of view, and the state has a particular point of view. And they don't always jive. They are competing interests. And you have to push back, and sometimes that doesn't make you, the most popular person in the room. You have to do it in a respectful, professional manner, and it's a challenge. But you have to stand up. You have to stand up for yourself. I have to stand up for myself. I have to stand up for the people who work for me, and that's something I do all the time. I have a reputation for doing that, and sometimes when you're standing up for that, you're the nail sticking up, and somebody wants to knock you down with a hammer. I'm not a pushover. I fight for what's right. I stand up for what's right. I speak out when something isn't right. I'm a cooperative person. I don't like conflict, but if something isn't correct in the courtroom or in a case, I'm willing to point it out and speak up about it. Take the tough cases to trial. It's very easy to have 100% conviction rate if you don't take the hard cases to trial, if you only take the winners. So we're willing to go the extra mile. We take on very challenging sexual assault cases and child abuse cases that other jurisdictions would shy away from or turn their back on. Every county has a reputation. Every prosecutor's office has a reputation of what they're willing to do and not do. And our reputation is excellent because we have very well-trained people, and we're willing to take on those tough cases. We may lose, but it's the right thing to do to try and get justice for victims of crime. So that's the difference between me and a lot of other people. I'm your champion in the courthouse and in the courtroom.